Okay, aloha kako, everyone, welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. My name is Tapani Gori. Many of you know me already. I'm the Vice President and a board member at Maui Village Association. I'm also the General Manager here at Maui Ocean Center, so welcome on behalf of MVA and Maui Ocean Center. Thank you for being here tonight. A couple housekeeping issues. Restrooms are right there. That's the most important thing. If you need to go, stairs down here, and the door is right outside. This event will last here from 6 to 7 p.m. Excuse me, and we have the autograph signing by Lucienne inside the retail after 7 p.m. Retail exit, or we're going to go to retail through that door, and the ingress to retail is right around the corner. Kindly turn your cell phones volume off, please, during the presentation. We do not want to disturb the presentation. And we will start with the ole by the esteemed Kaho Lions, Naie. So I will hand it over to Kaho right now, and Kaho, if you could please come in and do the ole, please.
We call on all the ancestors. For we know that you have been the witness of the beginning of existence. Oh, Irie, Ekahena Naie, Uoike Maine, Uone Hanau, Eia Maina. Ikupai na o Hawaii nei, kako mai nei, kupa alo kahie. Nā kui ka ko, nā kui ki au, nā puma ko, nā puma nei, nā lala, nā vēlau, nā iwi o ta moki. Nā pupuna I hala, nā pupuna I ola. E no mātou nā pula I au ko. To the ancestors of the night, which are the female, the ancestors of the day, which are the male, calling the original gods, the original chiefs, the Lala, the migrators, the Velau, those that create the nations throughout the world. Our elders who have gone, our elders that sit with us today. We call on you all to come and give our blessings. And this is it. And all the hard work that went to create this, and all the people that came forth with their stories. Thank you. I'm going to say the Lord's Prayer. You say the little prayer you wish. E kumaku maku I loko karenga. E hoano I a kou I noa. E hiki mai ko aurahuni. E malami I a kou maki maka honu rei. E hiki mei I a malami I a makalani rā. E hāwi mai o e mako I ke rā I eina na kou na mei rā. E kaha mai hoi kama kou la me halana. E mako e uika me koe la me mako. Mai o kua e mako I ka ho wale wale I mai. E o pakele mai o e mako I ki mana ka mei. No tell. Amen. Amen. Ona ni he maua. Amama.
Thank you, Kaho. Much appreciated. First, let me start with introducing several of the dignitaries we have here. I would like to start with the former South Maui Council member, Kelly King. She was instrumental in making sure that this project happened. Much appreciated. I'm sure Lynn will talk about that a little bit more. thank you for being here, and thank you for your work that you have done on behalf of the community. Thank you for Council Member Tom Cook, South Maui, the current Council Member. I believe we have Bill Snipes here somewhere. Bill, and up please. Thank you, Bill, for being here. And thank you for your support. And Vernon Kalanikau. Vernon, please stand up. Vernon is a cultural specialist for the Office of Economic Development with Maui County, and he has been very instrumental in putting this book together as well, and making sure that the sense of place and the cultural voices are heard as well. NBA Board, we have Lynn Britton, of course. Lynn, stand up. And where's Nikta Houston? Please. Thank you. And we have several other board members. Not all of them are able to be here in person. Peter Cannon, many of you know Peter. He actually grew up in the area before it was developed. They had a family home right here in Maalaea Road. And, you know, he has a lot of good stories about Maalaea. And of course we have Lyndon Ibellet, who is our current MBA president. Unfortunately, he's not here today in person. He's actually watching us from Alaska. So, all is well in Alaska. I want to talk a little bit about and then I'll hand it over to Lynn, and Lynn can elaborate a little bit more. It was about 3.5 years when I remember it actually very clearly. Lucienne did a presentation here in the Sphere for the community. In many ways, and many of you have been part of that journey and have contributed, so much appreciation to all of you who actually contributed to it. You know, we have several people here in the audience today who actually are listed here in the book as well. So thank you for your input on that. As we all know, Maalaea is a very special place. There's a lot of history here, there's a lot of culture here, and the more I learn every day, the more beautiful it becomes and more special. So I can't stress that enough. And personally, I really, when I got my hands on this, it read like a good crime novel, Lucienne. You know, I couldn't put it down, so I hope you all enjoyed reading through that. So the title is Maalaea, the Untold Story of Maui Historic Crossroads, and there's a lot of super interesting information there and stories, so you'll enjoy that. After Lucienne's presentation, we will do an autograph signing event by Lucienne inside the retail store, and the book is available, of course, to purchase. Remember, the book proceeds are dedicated to Maalaea restoration projects, including the restoration of Maalaea Bay. Many of you have heard me talk about the corals and limu and opihi and all this, what we have here in the bay and in our watershed, and a lot of work remains to be done, you know, environmentally, culturally, to really revitalize and restore a lot of things here. And I believe this community will be amazing once the community gets together and really stays focused on that. So with that, I don't want to talk too long. So Lynn, if you don't mind, come over here and talk story a little bit about this book. And every project requires one person who is actually the driving force, and you're looking at her right here. So Lynn, thank you for everything you're doing.
Aloha. Aloha. Thank you all for being here. This is so exciting to see the faces and to be with the many people who contributed. As Tapani said, it has been a long journey. We started here in January of 2020. We got the OED grant in December of 2020, and then COVID hit Maui and we were locked down, as we all know, those of us that live here. Unfortunately, with the grace of UHMC Louis Hokuana and the librarian, they didn't even have their microfiche film equipment set up yet, but they agreed to do it so that Lucienne could start her research. It was the only place where we could start going through the Maui News files back to 1900. So it's really been quite an exciting journey. We had an amazing team, and I will introduce them all in a little while. First of all, I want to thank Lions. Where is Lions? Thank you. When Maui Ocean Center first opened, Lions did a volunteer training here, and I was living in Maalaea at the time, and I took the training. So I went, when we started working on the project, I actually found my notes from that training, and I contacted Lions, and I said, would you be part of the project? So anyway, thank you for being here to to begin the next phase of the journey. I want to thank James Morrison for the wonderful poo-poos from Seascape Restaurant. Weren't they delicious? Wow, fantastic. And Hula Cookies for the delicious cookies. And one of our Maalaea businesses, and I want to acknowledge Nick de Houston for all your work that you do for the community. Thank you. And she did bring her credit card. If anybody isn't a member already, please talk to Nick. Okay, I want to have Kelly come up and be with you. Kelly was at the first meeting of Maalaea Village Association after MCA disbanded, and Kelly's been with us every step of the way. So Kelly, would you say a few words, please? Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. I was going to just get up here and wing it, and I thought, I should write a few words down. If Lucienne could write a whole book, I should be able to write a page. And I didn't want to forget anything. But how many people here have actually read the book? Because I was given an early copy. And Tapani's right, it's a great read. I read it in 2 days, I couldn't put it down. And it also brought back a lot of memories. But really want to congratulate everybody who was involved in this. It's a marvelous literary achievement. It really is. Mishner comes to mind, so it might not be the last thing you guys do. But to Lucienne, Naie, Ruby Goldman, Lynn Britton, and all of the Maalaea Village Association folks, and everybody who is part of the history as well. I just want to congratulate everybody. I'm so happy and proud to have instigated the funding for this book and the increase when it actually doubled in size, because there's just so much information, but wonderfully written historical account of the cultural and environmental treasure that is Maalaea Village. And it was well worth the wait. So yes, it was. Many of us have enjoyed Maalaea for years, and my first attachment to this harbor community happened in the early 80s, the very early 80s, when I worked for Seasport Cruises. Some of you might remember, it was a Kihei-based boat company that operated one of only 2 Molokini snorkel tours, and we would race to get out there to get the good spot. Now there's 30 boats out there, and so you're lucky if you get any spot. But in those days, the Seasports Whale Watch boat, the Kaimanu, hosted Greg Kaufman, who was acquiring his sea time to get his captain's license so that he could later found the Pacific Whale Foundation, which was mentioned in the book. And my husband was involved with helping them track whales. He would sit up on the top of the boat, and he has copious notes of identifying whales and seeing the same whale sometimes in the same week. But we later actually moved to Maalaea in 1984, and we lived here for about a year. I couldn't really take the wind, but we rented a condo for about a year before we moved to Kihei and became permanent residents. And we had a 50th birthday for me celebration at Don Nelson's house, which is also mentioned in the book, so that brought back memories. The house is no longer there, unfortunately, but it was one of the few homes in the area. This book preserves the geographical history, the heritages of longtime local families, important cultural practices, and it mentions, and someone talked about Vernon, but it mentions the project that Vernon and I did for Kihei with the first Ahupua'a sign project too. So that's a really important piece of our history. And I remember back then sitting and talking with Vernon, and we were talking about the families that had been in Kihei for a long time, the Aquinas and folks like that, and I'm thinking someone should write a book. So, we're starting with Maalaea, but maybe Kihei's next. This book also preserves the important cultural practices that were here, and some of them remain, some of them were unfortunately destroyed. The environmental struggles, even including the fight to stop the military bombing on Kaho'olawe, which if you've lived here as long as I have, I've been in North Kihei at the same place since the early 80s, and we could feel the bombing every time it happened. Things would move around on our shelves. And also our efforts to preserve and restore the important land and marine ecosystems. So that's an ongoing story, and the struggles are not over. We're continuing to work toward preservation of Maalaea Mauka, and so all of those who out here who have a voice, we need your mana'o on that issue. And I think when you read this book, it's very inspiring, so people will want to get more involved. But we're also I was working with Tapani on the regional wastewater system for Maalaea to try to recover some of our clean waters and protect our reef system, which I think is down to 6%, 8% of what it used to be in the day. And it's Maalaea Bay, for those of you who don't know, is officially designated as an impaired body of water by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency. So it's not just a problem for the community, it's a problem for the entire bay. But the Untold story of Maui's historic Crossroads is a real easy read, and it's a fun journey for those of you who have been around for a while. It's chock full of facts, timelines, and pictures, so as you try to go through the story, you'll be flipping back and forth and looking at the pictures and seeing the old articles from the Maui News. And it presents Maalaea as an important environmental and cultural treasure, not just a tourist destination. So it really will change a lot of people's attitudes and thoughts towards this area. I really challenge all of the readers to finish this book and not be inspired, to look at this small community differently and become advocates for preserving and restoring what remains. And I think all of us, whether we live here or not, we are all affected. We drive by it all the time, and that's why it's the Crossroads. And again, congratulations to Lucienne, Rita, the Maalaea Association, and I'm really looking forward to your next project. And I'm thinking of you too as, maybe you do one on Kihei next, maybe McKenna, maybe, you just the amount of work that went into this, the professionalism, the writing is great, and the editing is great. So, hui ho. Can't wait for your next one. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kelly. At this time, I'd like to introduce the book team before I give the microphone over to Lucienne. So Lucienne Naie is the author. Lucienne. Rita Goldman is the editor, also known as Madam Inky. Pat Narrow, our amazing graphic designer, is on the mainland, but we miss her terribly, and I know she's with us in spirit. So, great job. And Cynthia Conrad did our beautiful cover. Yay, thank you. And I didn't see Dante Parducci, but I know he was going to be here. Is Dante here? Anyway, he is the photographer, and I contacted him and I asked him if we could use his photo for the front cover, so wanted to do that. And before we move on, I want to introduce Sandy Fujiwara, who's the retail manager. Sandy, do you want to just tell them what's going to go on after 7 o'clock? We're going to go to the...
Yeah, so after the presentation is done, we're going to move from the Sphere and go into the store, where you will have a chance to meet Lucienne and buy a copy of her book and have her sign it for you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Sandy. And Jean Vegas is here. Jean, just say hi. I knew Jean back at, 20 years ago with the Maui Writers Conference, so it's nice to work with her again. Okay. I think that's about it. We want to now turn it over for the program. Lucienne. Do your magic.
Thank you so much. I think I'll just use this microphone since it's already in my hand. And wow, just so nice to see all these faces here, many beloved friends and many folks who actually helped on this book. It does take a village, and we were very fortunate to have a whole bunch of sponsors here, not only the County of Maui, but also the Maalaea Village Association, Sierra Club of Hawaii, Maui Group, and Maui Ocean Center, all chipped in so we could make this a reality. And we have our great book team. I'm very sorry that Pat Naro cannot be here because without her, we wouldn't have had a book. It's very confusing trying to string all these pictures and facts together. You need somebody who's the major domo who goes, this has to go on this page, and what else do you want to go on that page? So, and then Cynthia did just a fabulous job on the cover. And I can't tell you how many versions of the cover we looked at. Many, right, Cynthia? You know, very, very patient. And those of you who are saying how easy it is to read, well, that's because Rita got her claws into it. I'm a little bit of a scholarly writer, and Rita made it all kind of fun and, you know, easy to go on the palate. So, and then we could not have made it through without Lyndon and Lynn, our MVA support team. They tracked down things, they provided graphics, photographs, anything that we couldn't figure out, they figured out and got done. And when people say, oh, yeah, I want to write a book, I said, well, do you have a whole bunch of people to help you? Because otherwise it's really hard. You know, if it has to be an accurate book, if you just want to write, you know, some sort of a nice story or something, that'd be great. But if you're trying to be accurate, then you really need a team, and we had a wonderful team. So I just want to give every thanks to this team. I also want to say that, like every author, there are probably mistakes in this book. We take full responsibility if we didn't get something right. We did try our best. So if your family history is a little different than it was portrayed in this book, we did try. And maybe there'll be future printings and we can kind of fix stuff up. But we went back and forth on so many different details because this book is full of details. We did try to check with Hawaiian cultural experts on the Hawaiian presentations, because none of us are Hawaiian, it's not our history. So we really relied a lot on folks, other folks, to look that through and say, yeah, that's the right direction, you portrayed this correctly. So this is just like a Cliff's Note version of the book. It has 5 chapters, and this is just like meet the 5 chapters. So chapter 1, we start with the ancient history of Maalaea. We start back 800 AD when there's the earliest dated human occupation here based on core samples taken in Kailea Pond. That's when they started noticing the canoe plants coming in and these core samples, pollen. So who knew this was happening? I saw an obscure study years ago and I thought, oh, that's interesting, I'll just keep this study. Well, here we go, it came in handy. And this section of the book ends at the overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom. So, first of all, where are we in Maalaea? Maalaea, everyone knows the harbor, everybody knows the ocean, the bay, but actually Maalaea are the coastal lands of the Ahupua'a of Waikapu. And as this picture shows, the lands are connected from the mountain to the sea. And they certainly were in the traditional times before any outsiders were here, and we just had Kanaka. They understood those connections, they understood where the streams went, they understood how the clouds followed the shapes of the mountains, they understood the sand dunes that were in between. Those were all very, very important features. Some of them are still here, some of them are gone. But it's just important to acknowledge that that's where we start with this land. And then what was here? Well, this is a very romanticized version of a little village, a little seaside village, and obviously this is supposed to be kind of after contact because you see some Western-style ships out there sailing. Herb Kane actually did this based on the remains of a little village over on the Kona side of the Big Island. But Maalaea itself, we don't know for sure if there were hale on the beach. We know there were plenty of hale and other things up on the hills above, but there was a freshwater pond in Maalaea. And there were land commission awards in Maalaea. There were Hawaiian families who felt that they had deep roots to this land. At least 3 families claimed these awards, and maybe even more, because a lot of people didn't get their paperwork right. What else is new, you know? So anyway, there were people associated with the beach here, with the shoreline, and of course it was a very different shoreline in those days. But there was plenty of abundance in the sea. There was an amazing array of limu and of pupu, you know, the little shells that you could scoop up and eat. And of course, the fisheries were quite abundant. So why not live here? And then you had the hills to farm. Chapter 2, we've ended the Hawaiian Kingdom days and we've moved into the territorial days. Of course, there's the little blip in between of the, what do they call it, the independent, you know, land of Hawaii when the sugar planters overthrew the queen. But things started changing. And in Maalaea, those changes also applied. Waikapu became a center for the cultivation of sugarcane very early on in the 1860s. And so the shipping was done from Maalaea for these early plantations. This is a map here from 1883. By that time, Maalaea not only had a built wharf, you know, Western-style wharf, there was a hotel and cafe. There were 2 native houses on the beach. There was a storehouse. There was a road to Waikapu. And then those little squiggly things are the natural gulches that are still there today. So we can kind of know about this land, you know, over 150 years by just looking at these old maps. Now, Maalaea functioned as a harbor until about like the early 1900s. It was kind of just got harder and harder for ships to put up with the winds and the weather there. And so they moved the harbor function over to McGregor Point, which is still considered part of the Maalaea area. It's on Maalaea Bay. And all that remains of an extensive network of landing areas, you know, there was a wharf, there was a waiting room for passengers, there were storehouses there, but all that remains are a few little concrete blocks built into the shoreline there. Other forms of transportation started coming to Maalaea as well because, of course, it's the crossroads. Every road has to go through Maalaea. It's just where you have to pass if you want to get from West Maui to South Maui, from West Maui to Central Maui. And so the Lahaina Pali Trail, which was, you know, started back in the days before, in the kingdom days before Western contact, evolved into a road that eventually even cars could drive on, and we still get stuck on it today. And Maui's first airport, some of you probably know this fun fact, was in Maalaea. What a crazy thing. I could have written a whole book on just choosing this site for an airport because it was not chosen by the government. They had many other sites in mind. But the son of the Inter-Island Steamship Company thought, I'm a pilot. I just finished World War I. Air travel is the thing of the future. We need airports. I'll just go around and find some cheap land to lease from the big plantations like A and B, and I'll establish an airport, and then I'll sell it to the government. And that's exactly what he did. And it lasted, I don't know, less than 10 years, you know. It was closed by 1934 because it's just a terrible place to try to land an airplane. But, you know, there still remains out there in the mud flats. And the airplanes, just to make sure, they were also seaplanes. They were Skigorskis, I think they were called, so just in case they could land on the water too. Moving on, chapter 3. This takes us from the 1930s into the 1950s. And Maalaea in peace and war. So during this time was the buildup to World War II. This is actual fleet maneuvers before the war started in Maalaea Bay. I just have to say at this point, we were so fortunate. The historian at the Noah sanctuary in Honolulu, Hans von Tilburg is his name, went out of his way to find us pictures that had never been used for anything before. So we had access to all these World War II archival charts and pictures. This chart shows that the leaders of the Marines were charting Maalaea Bay, that's Kailea Pond in the middle, and Maalaea is kind of down towards the bottom on the left-hand side. These were the positions of where all the landing crafts were going to be stationed to do their trial run to invade Iwo Jima and Saipan. So these invasions were rehearsed here in Maalaea Bay. A lot of people knew that there was training, but they didn't know how much training because it was kind of kept top secret. And then we have actual pictures. The one on the right, I believe, is on Maalaea Bay, laying down tracks to bring the landing crafts in. And then, of course, during the war and after the war, lots of equipment got abandoned out in the ocean. And so NOAA did a whole underwater project in 2015 just documenting all the old World War II wrecks that are out there and took some beautiful photos. So some of those are in the book because they're just an important part of our history. The war really had a profound effect on Maalaea Village because it primarily, about 35 people lived in Maalaea full-time in the 1930 census, and most of them were Japanese Americans. There were a few Hawaiian families, but most of them were Japanese Americans. Most of them had come to this country between the 1880s and the early part of the 1900s, and they mostly came from provinces where fishing was something that was a way of life. And so they fulfilled their contract with the sugar plantations and went to look for some place where they could have good fishing. And a lot of them ended up settling on a Wailuku Sugar Company land in Maalaea, and they leased their little house plots. And they set up a Shinto shrine to Ibisu-sama, who is one of the good luck gods in Japan and is associated with fishing and also commerce. And the shrine first was located right down by the ocean, and then it needed a little bit more protection, and the fishermen got a little more prosperous, and they built a proper shrine that was up the hill that's basically kind of located near where the Maui Ocean Center is today, near the Seascape Restaurant, I think was the location. And there's a picture of the little shrine here, and this was a very integral part of life for the community. But World War II came, and the shrine was shut down. No one who was ethnically Japanese could be a captain of a boat. You could work on a boat. So it just kind of put the community out of business. Most people moved away. 3 families were left during the war that stuck it out, including the Suboi family who owned Maalaea General Store. So a very unfortunate part of our history really changed Maalaea. And you have to realize that fishing was such a big deal in the 20s and 30s that it was the 3rd leg of the economy after sugar and pineapple. So it was a moneymaker, and many of the fishing fleets were owned by enterprising Japanese American immigrants who had put their skills to work in their new home. So the last little thing to comment on from this era, the years during the war and right after the war, is this is when surfing came to Maalaea from the western side of surfing. There's no record saying that Hawaiians surfed here, but why wouldn't they? They probably did. It's just, you know, when they list the famous surf breaks, they're all in Lahaina or other places. But Maalaea had waves, and this is a 1931 picture, and it shows where the freight train wave breaks to this day, And there's a side picture of Woody Brown, who, along with Maui's own Donald Uchimura, was one of the first to surf here. These were guys who were pioneer surfers. So we're moving along. We're in chapter 4 now, the post-war years, and the big news here is Maalaea got a harbor. Didn't have a harbor before, it had a wharf. The wharf was destroyed by 1930 by a series of tsunamis and storms and other things. And this harbor was built. Now, it took about 3 tries to get the harbor built because they built one breakwater and it wasn't, it didn't really work. And then they built the second breakwater, the little skinny one, and that needed help. And then they extended that little skinny one and, did some more modifications on the inside. And still, it was a very dangerous harbor. So this continues the story a little bit later in the book, but the harbor was usable, and a lot of fishing families used it. People brought their boats down here. We interviewed people who came down here every weekend with their mom and dad and took dad's boat out and went and caught fish for the family. And there were 2 boating clubs, and people used the harbor. It was a simple little harbor, but it was well loved and well used. In fact, they ran out of money when they were building the harbor, and the boating club had to put in the little walks where you walk out to your boat. They didn't have any money to put those little, they had places you could tie your boat. There's no way you could walk out to it. So the boating club members had to build those catwalks, and they organized it and they built it. That's the kind of spirit we've had here in Maalaea. So after the war, a lot of things changed. First of all, most of the Japanese American families had left. Some came back. The Maalaea store was still there, but it assumed new ownership too. Mr. Savoy had died during the war years, and he contacted, I believe, a nephew, James Unu. So Mr. Uno is who we all know, the Uno family associated with the Maalaea General Store, if you lived here in the 60s, 70s, 80s. But they came in the 1940s and took over the store and really made it work. They realized that there was a lot of interest with the new harbor here. They started carrying more boating supplies, not just general store sort of things. And there were new communities. A&B sold off 20 beachfront lots. Some of the families are here. I saw Tom Cannon come in. There were families that bought these lots, built modest little beach houses on them, and either the families lived here full-time or they lived here part-time, and just became part of the Maalaea story. The 50s also brought the first commercial use of the land again. Halikini o Maalaea was a motel. 1958-59, few people remembered it, and it served exactly 4 rooms. It had 4 rooms to rent and a manager's little cottage. But beautiful painting. That's the painting down on the right-hand side. And at the same time that the beach lots were being developed, a handful of lots up on the cliffs got developed. And we still have a few of the original families, like the Gami family, and the Feltzer family, that still live up there. And I know we have a few representatives here tonight of those families. So there's a picture of, I think that's Addie Lewis and Ron Gami showing off their lobsters. They knew the secret lobster hole to go and get lobsters out of Maalaea Bay. So as the 60s came along, a lot more changes came. The Coast Guard stationed a vehicle full-time in Maalaea. Buzz's Wharf building was brought over here by the boat club. It was an old building from Puunene Airfield. They bought it cheap. They renovated it. They rented part of it to Buzz's restaurant, and they used another part as a meeting room. The Ting's Fishery got a big federal grant, the biggest one that had been awarded in Hawaii, and really expand their fish depository so the fishing boats could land their catches here. They didn't have to just come in at the end of the day and then sail to Honolulu to drop off their catch at the tuna canning plant in Honolulu. There could be an ice house where they could store and go back out and fish some more. So lots of good things were happening, and lots more that I couldn't even fit in here. But by the 1970s, all those sweet little beach lots were starting to get developed into multi-story condos, very lovely condos. But the situation that had changed was we had a community plan process. And those of you who serve on the community plan here, this is a great story. At a stroke of a pen, when that plan was signed in 1970, all of those little beach lots became apartment or hotel designation. And the tax structure changed on them, and they all became condominiums, with the exception of 2 lots. 2 lots remained undeveloped. It took a while, but by the end of the 1970s, all of the lots that wanted to convert to condominiums did convert. At the same time, we had scientists jumping in and saying, wow, you know, there's all this building going on in Maalaea, and we don't even know what's going on in our oceans. They did a little survey from UH and found out that there was the greatest variety of coral types, the greatest variety of limu, the greatest variety of, what do they call, gastropods, you know, all the little shell sort of things, right here in Maalaea Bay, more so than any other place in the state. And yet no one knew until this study was done. Also, people started getting interested in the whales, and there started to be calls for Maalaea Bay to become a whale sanctuary. And then eventually that call was expanded to have the whole state set aside waters to protect the whales. So these things sort of set the stage for modern Maalaea. We had landowners who wanted to move into the 1980s. There was a real estate boom on. A lot of people moved to Maui in the 1980s. I did. Lots of other people came here in the 1980s. And there were plans to develop the Triangle parcel. There were plans to develop land, A&B's land, behind all the condos. There were big plans for the lands on the hillsides. And so there were equally big plans to save some of the land. And so between 1980 and the present, citizen-led efforts established some of the things that we take for granted today in the Maalaea area, including the National Wildlife Refuge at Kealia Pond, which, this was an old fish pond, and it is currently Maui's largest wetland, 700 acres. It was not easy to preserve it. There's a whole saga in the book, and we left half of it out because, the nip and tuck of it was amazing. It's amazing it ever happened. The same thing with the whale sanctuary, not a popular concept. Fishermen were very concerned that there would be federal regulations and whole areas would be off limits to fishing. That hasn't proved to be the case, but fishermen are still very leery about any expansion of the sanctuary. And then the Lahaina Pali Trail, the ancient pathway into Maalaea, was redone and rededicated in 1994. And so those were like 3 big changes that happened as the modern age came into Maalaea. And behind a lot of these changes were the newly formed Maalaea Community Association, started in 1988. It eventually became the Maalaea Village Association in 2017. But the association weighed in on all kinds of things that had to do with Maalaea. They worked with the folks who were building the harbor shops. They allied with probably 30 other organizations to stand up to a terrible harbor expansion plan that eventually the Army Corps pulled and apologized to the community because they had been wrong about how the currents worked. So their proposed plan, which would have blown up 4 acres of reef and destroyed all kinds of other things, never would have worked. But also the community association really weighed in on what they wanted the land surrounding them to look like. And they realized that they really had to get involved in finding better solutions for the drainage from upslope and also the wastewater from the existing condos and the existing cesspools at the harbor. So we've come to the end of the journey. This is, like I say, the Cliff's Notes version. We have some Maalaea landmarks that still remain. We still have the Ibisoku Jinsa shrine. It got relocated, but it's in a beautiful location, and it's still offering blessings and has really expanded its outreach to all the people of the sea, not just people who fish. We have the Maalaea General Store. It's been through a few owners, but you can still get some yummy grinds there. We had to say aloha to Buzz's Wharf and to the Waterfront Restaurant. I know Gary's here tonight. Places that many of us spent happy hours, look forward to hanging out there with our friends, meeting for special occasions like birthdays. These are just part of Maalaea's past. But we can only say mahalo to all who have brought this story to life. And many of you are in this room. We really couldn't have done it without all of the people who shared their histories of Maui, their histories of Maalaea, and their photographs. We were able to get so many archival photographs thanks to families that had stashed them away, and thanks to our wonderful institutions like Hale Ho'iki, the Bailey House Museum, the Sugar Museum, the Bishop Museum, Maui Community College and their newspaper files. The list is long, and I'm really happy to see Antonio Ramil here tonight because I used your book extensively. This is a privately printed book. You want to stand up a minute? Give this man a hand here. He is an unsung hero. He created a book going through old Maui news files of the whole history of Maui from 1900 to the 1980s when he wrote the book. And it is a gem. If you wondered what happened, you're not going to go and look at all those newspapers. You're going to go read his book. And luckily, I have a copy, and I think the libraries have copy. It's probably long out of print, but it's just a gem for any historian. And we are also really indebted to Dr. Susan Lebo and to Lyons. Oh my God, Kahunaoni. He shared so many important stories about, the underpinnings, the things that you don't see in Maalaea but are here, the spiritual connections of the land and the resources here. And so did Uncle Charlie Maxwell, Uncle Ed Lindsay. All of them in the day gave me information that I wrote down or I saved their letters or articles, and it was all so useful, as did Leslie Bruce, Jill Engeldow, Gaylord Kubota. Many of these folks are no longer with us. Gail Ainsworth and her Index of the Maui News. And Stan Solomilo, who worked for the county and did a wonderful nomination for the Maalaea General Store and really got into the history. And even Peter Young and his webpage, he helped us out. Everybody was trying to help us out, so it really took a village. Avery Chumley was so helpful with his maps and archival photos as well. And so many of the folks, the families that just came forward, people, they had lived here in the 70s, the 80s, or their families had lived here in the 30s or the 40s. The Cannon family were really extremely dedicated. Both Patty Mazingo and Peter Cannon were constantly contacting us and giving us new links to get the family stories together. So we are very grateful also for artists who contributed their works, Macario Pascual, Brooke Parker, the late Herb Kane, and Jeffrey Moore, who did some of his posters for the Save Maalaea effort. And photographers, my goodness, our book is full of pictures because people just dedicated time to sending us lots of pictures to choose from. So it just, the thank yous go on, but I know Martha Woodbury is here tonight. I don't know if any other photographers are here, but thank you to all of you. It really made a difference. And we were very grateful to be able to interview about 20 different families who had connections to Maalaea in different eras. And we had hoped to actually give a little section to each of them. We would have had a very, very long book if we did that. So we need to figure out a different way because those interviews are priceless. And that information, it isn't being repeated. It is the knowledge that they got from their parents and their grandparents and their family memories. but we will find the right place to post that, because those are done and they have precious memories in them. So, and then, are just people that help. They proofread, they looked for stuff for us, they reviewed. It does really take a whole village to produce something that's a local history. So we stand here, we hope you all enjoy reading this book and know, how many different community members it took to really make it what it is. And of course, it could have been even better, but we didn't have another year, right, Lynn and Rita? So thank you all, and we look forward to signing some books.
We do have 10 minutes before we go to the gift shop, so does anybody have any questions for the book team? I was going to ask Rita to come up and join Lucienne at the table. Anybody have any questions or burning thoughts or anything you want to ask about the book?
I see one up there. Yes.
Yes.
There is a little bit, yes. Actually, the Battle of Kakanilua, the Battle of... How do you turn it on? Is it on? Hello? I'll use this one. The Battle of Kakanilua, it is well known that those troops from the Big Island, who included a young Kamehameha I, landed along Maalaea Bay and then marched through the sandhills to eventually be slaughtered by the Maui forces. So yes, that is described in there, and there were a few other, major events in history that are described in that section of the book, the first chapter of the book.
Okay. I want to close by just thanking Lucienne again. When you read the book, you will be totally amazed. And it couldn't have happened without Rita, because Lucienne would still be writing the book. Literally. It was truly a team effort. So Maui Ocean Center is going to be carrying the book. They're also going to be doing online sales if you can't come in person. Please contact them. They gave the website on the poster. And the other museums, the Maui Historical Society and the A&B Sugar Museum are going to be carrying the book. And Lahaina Restoration Foundation, Kealia Pond, and their wonderful retail outlet there in Kealia. And Native Books on Oahu. Miley Meyer was very excited when I showed her the book. So anyway, we'll see you at the gift shop. Thank you all for being here tonight and for your support. And we need to sell 3,000 books for the grant. So get as many as you want for Christmas presents. Thank you.
And for everyone, somebody who wants to leave this event, you can leave that way, back where you came from. Everybody going into retail to your right, please. Thank you, everyone.